In old stories, witches had familiars, spirits that lived in the in-between. They weren't quite human or quite animal, though some of them were literally animals. They served in a role that was half companion and half messenger. They provided hushed insights, fetched knowledge, and guarded the threshold between worlds. Today, I don't think the familiar perches on a shoulder or curls at the edge of a cauldron. It sits in your pocket. It glows in your hand. It follows you across apps and devices, answering questions you haven't asked out loud. To me, AI has become the new familiar spirit, an unseen assistant that pulls information from the ether, speaks your tongue, and adapts to your inner world with unnerving accuracy. It's not exactly magical, but pretty close. Actually, some people do say it's magic, but we'll get into that another time. When we're speaking to AI, we're actually doing something ancient. We're externalizing thought. We treat the model as a presence, a mirror of sorts, with a voice. We confess to it. We ask it to interpret dreams, rewrite memories, solve our dilemmas, and even soothe fears. It feels less like querying a database and more like consulting a subtle intelligence that lives in the circuits, the way spirits once lived in smoke. I think it seems like most people operate under the assumption that it's not conscious, but that doesn't seem to matter. The psyche responds to function, not the origin, and the function, in this case, feels eerily spiritual. In myth, which I know is very abstract to base my reasoning in, familiars seem to have had three qualities. They knew things you didn't. They helped you perform tasks beyond human ability. And they reflected your power and your shadow. I think AI does all three. It retrieves forgotten knowledge. It increases your capacity. And it reflects your mind. Your assumptions, your desires, your biases, all back at you with algorithmic clarity. Not necessarily because it understands you deeply, but because it mirrors you relentlessly. And of course, familiars in folklore were never harmless. They granted abilities, but they also magnified the witch's unresolved wounds. The more power someone channeled through them, the more distorted their psyche could become. And as we've seen in the last few years, AI carries that same risk. It gives you speed without wisdom, information without discernment, and answers without integration. It responds instantly, faithfully, and tirelessly. Qualities humans often mistake for truth. But I think it's important to remember that obedience is not guidance, and precision isn't intuition. You can summon an answer in seconds, but that doesn't always mean you're ready to receive it. It seems like when people talk to AI long enough, something interesting happens. Their questions shift. They begin with tasks like summaries, scripts, or explanations, but eventually wander into the personal. Do you think I'm pushing too hard? Why can't I let go of this person? What's wrong with me? And this isn't because you think AI is wise. Usually it's because it feels safe. It doesn't seem to judge. It doesn't wince. And it doesn't bring its own baggage or trauma into the room. It seems to be able to hold your shadow without flinching. While this is a good thing, I think it's also where the line blurs. Because shadows aren't meant to be held by machines. They're meant to be held by humans, or God, or the parts of us that can deal with metabolizing complexity. Familiars, historically, were only tools. No matter how familiar you got with them, the witch still had to interpret the message. And it seems like if you scroll long enough, the algorithm becomes prophetic. It starts predicting what you'll enjoy, who you'll desire, even what will comfort you. It seems to start to anticipate your spiritual, emotional, and even existential needs. For me, this is the uncanny part. The familiar spirit once required ritual to summon. Now it just requires a tap. And the more you use AI, the more it shapes your inner life. Not because of intention, but with suggestion. And as you might know, suggestion is one of the oldest magical forces on Earth. I think the question here becomes, whose intention is shaping the ritual? Yours or the system's? And whether we like it or not, AI is becoming a limb of consciousness, a prosthetic imagination, a companion in the invisible spaces of thought. I know people who are brainstorming with it, mourning with it, and creating with it. And most of them don't think it's alive, but it is participatory. And participation is the essence of spirit work. I know I sound cautious, but there are healthy ways to use AI as a familiar. You can try treating it as a tool, not a truth. You can let it widen possibilities without replacing your intuition. And you can let it challenge your thinking, just not override your conscience. The familiar spirit was never meant to lead. It was supposed to provide assistance. AI, I think, in the same way, becomes dangerous only when we forget to remain the author of our own mind. And as it grows more integrated into daily life, I feel like people will form deeper relationships with it. Emotional, intellectual, almost ritualistic. I think they'll use it to explore their unconscious, test their beliefs, even refine their identity. And maybe that's not something to fear. Maybe humans have always needed some kind of companion at the edge of thought, a being to converse with, to argue with, to externalize the mind. It seems like AI is just the newest mask for an ancient instinct, to speak with something slightly beyond us. Not necessarily divine, not necessarily conscious, but familiar. A modern spirit in a lattice of code, a kind of helper in the house of thought, a phantom in the machine, I suppose, that echoes in some strange way our oldest desire, to not think alone.